Good afternoon and welcome to the Hub Culture News Show. I'm Edie Lush, Davos 2025. We started off this morning calling it Blue Wednesday, spotlighting the year of the ocean, where we explored how investing in the blue economy can drive both profit as well as the preservation of this vital global resource. From early stage investments to innovative debt for nature swaps, we heard powerful insights from both Marisa Drew of Standard Chartered and Chris Gorrell-Barnes of Ocean 14. And had a pretty sobering conversation as well with Ronald Golden, who shed light on the stark reality of domestic violence. In the United States alone, affecting 1 in 3 women and in fact 1 in 9 men. Importantly, she addressed the pathways for escaping these often invisible struggles. Peter Schlosser also turned up the heat, literally, with us here in the studio by showing how interdisciplinary approaches can save lives as climate change intensifies its grip on the planet. This afternoon, we are bringing you even more inspiration. We're going to be speaking in just a moment to Adrianne C. Smith from FleishmanHillard. We'll speak to Alyse Nelson from Vital Voices, both working to empower not only women, but many other voices within the community to lead boldly in a world that needs it more than ever. We'll have a deep dive into the world of decentralization. We'll be speaking to a guest from Ukraine, and we'll have a look at longevity as well. Evening packed with inspiration, ideas, and the kind of conversations that only Davos can deliver. So, joining me, first of all, Adrianne C. Smith. How are you?
I am great.
Very nice to see you.
That's the story I'm sticking to today, right now at this moment.
Okay. Well, let's go to the elephant in the room. I don't know what large orange creatures are called. No, I didn't say that.
Oh.
We heard from the U.S. government, from the new U.S. President, that within the federal government, there would be no more employees who were working on diversity and inclusion. Now, one could react in several ways. I believe you're urging companies to react reasonably. Give us what you think.
Well, I'm glad you were very particular about the language that you used and mentioned the federal government, or just that DEI ban has been placed on the government. I think that's important because it's a signal that it's not for all organizations, in particular privately owned organizations who still have the autonomy to run their own companies. So we have to be very mindful of that. Now, the next thing we think about is, what do you want as an organization, as a company, as a CEO, as a board of directors? Do you really want to isolate your people, isolate the humans that actually do the work and make your organization the profitable, hear me when I say your profitable organization that provides business opportunities not only to grow communities and sustain the world around them, or do you want to stop? And I think that's what's important, to think about the ultimate value, the very underpinning that makes your organization what it is and who it is. And that means, are you thinking about your profit and the profit people, bringing people into that narrative and supporting them, thinking about the innovation that when you have diverse voices at the table, it brings about innovation. It creates opportunities for you to think differently, for you to grow and expand opportunities for growth. So I would say to CEOs and to board executives, like, don't fall into the hype. Right? This world of DEI, it should never die, especially if you look at it from the human connection business and the very underpinning that helps your organization grow. This work has to continue. We've seen some companies like Meta. One of my friends, Doug Melville, did an article in the, from Forbes magazine that says, Meta gets rid of DEI programming to create DEI programming, right? So
interesting.
It's interesting because it's the truth, because they shift the language, and they took the title away from the leader who was doing DEI work and said, now you'll be in charge of accessibility and engagement. Well, that's DEI work, right? If you think about that, that's the work of DE&I. So if you want to play the game, the naming game, have at it, but do not give up the core principles of what it takes to run a successful organization. And the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging, or whatever you want to call it, is still the very piece or the undergird that makes your company great.
So language matters. So it's interesting that we're seeing a shifting of the plates there. I wonder what difference you've seen as the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer in the last few years. What progress have we made, and what are you most concerned about that we work on now?
So here, having been doing this work for a long time, I've definitely seen the ebbs and flows of the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion, affirmative action, and how it has benefited many people. And I do understand that when there's a crisis moment, there tends to be a peak in the work. We do know that the most recent, in the last 3 years, when George Floyd was murdered in front of the world, we saw there was a peak in terms of the interest of work and people saying we're committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're committed. We're writing large checks never to be realized. We are, putting up a black box. We're making sure that we increase our diversity numbers, tenfold. When in the reality, they should have just reevaluated how they're treating the people in their organization and hiring practices and taken a look at their policies without making a grand statement. Just do the work, right? So what I've seen is if you're committed to the work, you're still 10 toes down in doing the work. If you're going with the ebbs and flows of the media hype, then you're just being held hostage to what's popular and what's not popular. But if you're fundamentally thinking about, and I'll keep saying this, the growth trajectory of your company, you're still going to focus on the work. So I think what's important here is that if we take a look at the trends and we see from a number standpoint, the benefit to an organization's bottom line, DEI has been a success metric. It's been an imperative for the success of your business and for the culture and community around you.
I could talk to you all day. We've only got a short amount of time, and I want to make sure that we are inspiring younger people who are watching this show not to give up hope. And to continue the legacy of some of the great work that you've done. Not that you're going anywhere, but how do we make sure more people get involved, stay motivated?
Well, I'm very real about my longevity on this earth. And I know what's important is succession planning. And I think sometimes, leaders and organizers get so stuck in being in control in the role that they don't release the realm or the leash, whatever it is.
Hand over the keys.
They don't hand over the keys, and you have to. And in order for us, if we want to talk about sustainability and keeping like the forward-focused movement of what good we've done on this earth, you have to believe in succession planning. You have to be able to create access and opportunities for that next generation to continue the movement. I know at this stage in my life, I'm not competing with anybody, right? My knees are tired. I get sleepy really early. I'm not going to do it. But my role now is more so as a mentor and a sponsor to help that next generation come in. And I can use a great example of some of the work that I've done with the Can Diversity Collective. I had the opportunity to go to the Cannes Lions Festival as a voyeur in 2017. And when I went, out of the 20,000 people that were in attendance, only 200 looked like me. Now, this is the Festival of Creativity. It's the Oscars of the advertising industry, where you have everyone who was celebrating the great creative work, but only 200 of those people that are attending look like me. The problem is when I walked down the set, and if you could close your eyes and you listen to the music and you felt the vibe, you'd be like, oh, my people are here. Their culture is here. But when you saw everyone dancing off beat, you're like, no, we're not here.
With the white man over, right?
We're not here. So, what I decided to do that year was let's just, and, interestingly enough, it was on the consciousness of the people of Cannes Lions. They said, what can we do to make this festival more creative? And I thought, or more inclusive. And I was like, is this a trick question? You just have to invite people here. You have to let them know that this space and place exists. So I started bringing young people to the festival in 2018. I brought 5 young people to the festival, and they showed up and showed out. Like we had, I tell the story all the time. I was ear hustling on a conversation, and they were talking about these 2 black girls from America who were changing the trajectory of the conversation and elevating everything they're doing. I was so excited about having them there, and I was like, excuse me, but who are you talking about? And they said Alex and Jenna, which were 2 of the young women that I brought to the festival. And since then, and more importantly, did it not only change the experience for the people at Cannes Lions, it changed the experience for the individual. So the impact that it had. So now this young lady can now she has like her aperture, her mental just focus has changed about, she has the option to live somewhere else outside of the U.S., and also she can compete on an international level. So at that moment I decided I'm going to bring 25 people to the next festival, and we hosted the first diversity, equity, and inclusion beach activation in the history of Cannes Lions. And when we go back in 2025, this will be our 5th year.
Fantastic.
We've taken young people from at least 6 different continents. My running joke is, I have a lot of running jokes, is that, if you know anybody in Antarctica, let us know. We'll bring them over.
Nice.
But it's just been such an excellent journey. Now we've taken young people to Dubai. We've brought people to WEF to experience this. And it literally has changed just the way they have their outlook on life. And I think having people see them in this space sparks a curiosity of, who are you? Let's talk. Tell me about your dreams. What do you want to do? And it just creates a moment of forward-focused movement.
And collaboration and connection.
Collaboration and connection,
is all
100%.
About.
That's what it is.
Adrianne, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thanks for having me. This has been amazing. Call me back anytime.
Beautiful. Well, we'll see you. What are you doing tomorrow?
All right.
All right. Thank you very much, Adrianne. Stay with us. We'll be right back with more inspiring stories.
Thank you.
I promised you an afternoon of inspiring voices, and our next guest has joined me here, Zoya Lytvyn. She is an entrepreneur from Ukraine with some incredible stories. How are you?
Good, and excited to be in Davos.
Delighted you're here. Now, you are running something in Ukraine that's pretty interesting. Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum asked you to open a center for in the fourth industrial revolution in Ukraine during the war. Is that right?
Yes, because despite the war, people here in Economic Forum, they often refer to Ukraine as a digital tiger of Europe, because we are very good in digitalizing the government and creating new government technologies. And war, it didn't stop this process. It even became a catalysator. So now you can register a child in your smartphone. You can open a company in 2 or maximum 7 minutes in Ukraine. You can even invite someone to get married on the app, and you can do it there, but not divorce.
Okay. You're an entrepreneur, so I imagine this was an interesting venture for you. But tell me a little bit about your own work. I know you work in education.
Yes, so I am an impact entrepreneur in a field of education, and I run the leading educational NGO in Ukraine. So we make very different projects. We create innovative schools, offline and online, because my flagman project for the government was the platform that covers an entire secondary school curriculum. And it was very helpful during COVID, but now when we have a war, we have over 2 million kids regularly learning on this platform.
Wow.
I also empower teachers because I believe to make change in education, you really need to start with teachers. And I provide access to quality education. Before it was mostly about deprived children, but now it's for all kids of Ukraine, internally displaced, externally displaced. And I also advocate education. I try to prove to governments that it's actually not an expenditure. It's the most profitable investments that government can make in its citizens or families can make in its kids. So,
give me an example of a student that you've seen benefit from one of your programs.
Well, I have many, many stories. And I remember a very shy young gentleman that was very academically bright, but he never had real friends. And after being a part of our scholarship program at our school, he managed to receive a scholarship from Stanford, MIT, Israeli Technion University. And last Economic Forum, I was so delighted that he was a speaker on another panel. Like,
amazing.
Or now when we speak about wartime, I would say it's not only about kids, it's about the families. So sometimes we can welcome internally displaced children with families and mother who lost everything, husband, home, work, and school is like something sustainable in their life.
So you invite the entire family to learn?
I invite kids, but when
benefits.
family had to relocate, finding a school for child is often a first very important step. And there are cases of the families that child is at school, and then we invited mom to join our NGO team and settle in this new reality and new place.
What's your hope for Ukraine in the coming year?
Peace, of course. That's my biggest dream, and I not only dream about it, I try to do everything to minimize the impact of war on Ukrainian children. And I believe that in this war, everyone has its front line. So by continuing to learn, Ukrainian children are also fighting for their bright future, and they deserve to have a bright future and real childhood.
Absolutely. Zoya, thank you so much for stopping by the Hub Culture Evening News Show. Come back and tell us what's happened next year, will you?
I promise I will.
Thank you very much. Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Vital Voices. Welcome back. I'm Edie Lush here with the Hub Culture Evening News Show, coming to you live from Davos in 2025. I mentioned we were going to be speaking with more vital voices, and I have one here with me, Alyse Nelson, the President, CEO, and co-founder of Vital Voices Global Partnership. Welcome.
Thank you.
So I'm delighted to have you on. I'm always delighted to have folks on who are advancing women's issues, and talking about why it's so important to include women across the board. But give me your take on where we are now in terms of inclusion of women.
Well, I'm sure you're aware of the United Nations UN Sustainable Development Goals.
I am.
The 17 goals, I think we all know Goal 5 is the advancement of
It's the
women.
best goal.
But we also know that if we don't solve Goal 5, we're not going to achieve the other goals, right? Because women are so integral across the board, whether it be climate or economic opportunity or education, political stability around the world. And I think our concern right now is that in 2030, at the rate we're going in terms of women's rights, access, opportunity, we will be in a worse place in 2030 than we were in 2015 when these goals were established. So that's concerning to us, but we don't lose hope. You know, we're big believers that women are change makers. Women are the closest to the problems, thus they come up with the most innovative solutions. So what we do at Vital Voices, and we have done over the last 28 years, is really search the world for women who have a daring vision, who are taking on some of these greatest challenges, from climate to economic opportunity, gender-based violence, online violence, for example, and really invest in them through training, mentorship, visibility, credibility, grants program, and more recently a crisis response initiative, which I'd love to tell you more about. And really we invest in them so that they can take these issues on. It's now been about, 47,000 women across 192 countries to date that we've invested directly in. And the impact of their work touches millions, if not a billion. And that's our goal actually by 2030, is to impact 1 billion lives through our network.
I had Ronald Golden on this morning, who was speaking about domestic violence, and in the United States it affects 1 in 3 women. Actually, it touches 1 in 9 men as well. And I hadn't realized just how pervasive it is. And you mentioned you have a crisis response. Tell me a little bit about that. What she was interested in was telling me about how, or what I spoke to her about was about how the tools you need when you've decided to get out. And I imagine, and what she said is, if it's bad, run. Don't worry about it. But it's hard,
It's
right?
very hard.
It's really hard.
Of course. I think the really interesting thing here is that violence against women, whether it be domestic violence, rape as a weapon of war, rape on college campuses, honor crimes, it is an issue that affects every single country. It is an issue that affects every socioeconomic background, every industry, every religion, every culture, every country. It knows no borders. So in many ways, it should be an issue that we can all rally around, because it also is a huge economic issue. And that's what people often don't know. The billions upon billions of dollars that are lost every year from loss of productivity, from domestic violence, from medical expenses, loss of education, from healthcare to police to judicial system. It's a huge cost. And it's not getting better. I would say it is getting worse around the world. We certainly see that as we look to conflicts around the world. I mean, from Iran to Sudan. I mean, rape as a weapon of war is rampant. It is probably the worst we have ever seen in Sudan. And we're doing quite a bit of work with Sudanese women leaders who've set up these emergency response rooms to provide protection.
Wow.
We've evacuated almost 40 women out of Sudan over the last year or so. We also are working quite a bit with women leaders in Ukraine. You heard from Zoya.
She's incredible.
But also, women leaders in Afghanistan. We partnered with a coalition of leaders to evacuate 1,200 women leaders and family members. These are women who are on the Taliban's kill list. And it was critical to get them out because they're the future of the country. They're going to go back and lead the country. And not one of them wants to stay in the United States or Canada or wherever they've been evacuated to. But it's an issue, I think, where we're seeing it's not just about sort of power dynamics in the world, it's also really an issue of the fact that there is, I think, a growing fear of women's leadership, and women speaking truth to power. As we see the rise of autocracy around the world and receding democracies.
Rolling back diversity, equity, and inclusion in federal government in the United States.
Right. There is a huge pushback against the rights of women around the world.
And I guess it's about bringing people along with the program. That's sort of one point. And the point is that if a rising tide lifts everybody, it is hard for people to feel like they're not being left behind. You mentioned something there about rape as a tool of war, and I remember listening or reading the World Economic Forum's risk report and how global conflict is actually the number one risk, I believe, this year, and then climate, the second risk. But it feels like women's issues are bound up in all of those.
They are bound up in all. You do see equality down at the bottom there.
Right.
But it made the top 10,
right.
which it certainly needs to make the top 10 in terms of risk. But yes, as you said, it is across the board. And I think one of the reasons we started this crisis response unit is because conflict disproportionately impacts women and children, right? And what we know is that whether it's evacuating women, providing legal support to them, helping them to, get out of their country if needed, it's a critical time for all of that. And we have, through our crisis response program and our urgent assistance program, been able to support more than 10,000 women who have been targeted with violence, but also really as a tool to silence their voices. And I think one of the things that's quite scary right now, and this goes along with those global risks, you see misinformation, disinformation also high up on the list, maybe like number 3 or 4. And this is an area that really impacts women. If you look at where the disinformation, the deep fake porn revenge, the, just online harassment and violence, it is primarily against women. And it's really about how do we silence women's voices. It is a tool.
Yeah.
Make no mistake about it. And if you are a woman of color, it is even more so. If we look back to the primaries in 2020, there were a number of women candidates who were, remember, on the Democratic side. And there was a study that looked, and this is in the United States, it looked basically across the board at Republican and Democratic candidates and the online hate, the mis and disinformation, and 80% of that targeted the women who were running, regardless of political affiliation. But of that 80%, 90% targeted one woman, and that was Kamala Harris. And why? Because she's also a woman of color and the only woman of color.
Right.
So I think this is an issue we really need to look at because, there are certainly abilities. I mean, if we can shut down TikTok in a day, we can certainly protect women and children and vulnerable communities from hate online. Absolutely.
Well, you're getting nothing but love online here in the Hub Culture Evening News Show. Thank you so much, Alyse, for joining us. Come back and tell us how you get on next year with all of your critical work. I'm Edie Lush. We'll be back in just a moment. Stay with us. talk
it out.
about it now. So this is a show which. Welcome back. I'm Edie Lush, here with the Hub Culture Evening News Show from Davos 2025. Delighted now to be joined by Tim Lash, President of West Health. How are you?
Great, Edie, how are you?
Good, nice to see you.
Great to see you. It's great to be in Davos.
Good. Well, tell me, first of all, tell our audience what West Health does and why you're here in Davos.
Sure, so West Health is a nonprofit focused on aging, aligning the delivery of healthcare for an older population, and bending the cost curve. You can have a great health system, but if it's fabulously expensive, no one can access it. And we historically have been very focused on making the policy change that could fuel that type of innovative healthcare delivery. But increasingly, employers play a very important role, Edie, in helping drive that, not only for their employees, because they're at risk financially for them from a health perspective, but that has a spillover effect, into the community, and it has a spillover effect into a younger population. And those employers are here at Davos, and we're here to look for opportunities to engage with them to move things on the right side of history, so to say, right, in terms of how we deliver healthcare and how we address some chronic conditions such as obesity, mental health conditions or behavioral health conditions that have a huge human impact on individuals and families, but have a huge economic impact on the employers and the broader economy at large.
So I imagine if I was an employer, I'm thinking, yeah, that would be great, but I've got a lot of other things on my plate. What's in it for me?
Well, historically, employers have viewed healthcare as a table stakes game, right? It's as a benefit, attracting employees. We have great healthcare, right? And so come to my company. But increasingly, the cost of healthcare, not just for the coverage, but their direct exposure to to the healthcare expenditures themselves, right, have become crippling in many cases. And I was at a session earlier today looking at obesity and the GLP-1 receptor agonists. And one of the employers shared that in one quarter they had $150 million exposure for the drugs we call Ozempic, Wegovy, Zepbound, et cetera.
Wow.
That's not a small amount of money. And so this isn't just something that's a benefit to employees. This is something that addressing it is a business imperative.
So what should employers be doing differently?
So I think employers have a responsibility to look at the conditions, and I think behavioral health is an example of this. So many of us face anxiety, depression, other stresses, and with everything, it's often helpful to ask the question why. And so when we think about employee benefit programs for behavioral health, many employers put employee assistance programs in place, or a breathe program, or yoga, other things. But if you start to ask, so why are employees stressed at work, right? Some of it might be they just need you do need some assistance programs. But if you ask why a few times, there might be some organic issues intrinsic to the organization, bad management, bad culture, bad processes that are contributing to that. And if you don't address those things, you're going to have employees that are not satisfied, don't have great wellness, and ultimately experience high healthcare expenditures.
Right.
The same is true on the other side of it. When we look at psychopathology, right, there are things organic to an individual, right, that aren't going to be fixed by addressing an organization's processes or even, employee benefits that are targeted on addressing their stress. They need more integrated care on the health side, and there too employers have a responsibility, I believe, to exert their leverage on their plans and on where they're deploying their dollars, so that we can have a more integrated approach to healthcare. And I think behavioral health is a great example for that. And if they do those three things, there can be huge return, not only in terms of employee productivity, if we think about our employees and their brain capital, but there can be a significant economic ROI in terms of health savings that would not be realized if we just looked at one of those facets individually.
Give me a success story. Tell me a tale that will inspire employers to do something differently.
So we do a lot of work with nonprofit health systems in the United States, and Northwestern Health System in Chicagoland is not just a health system; they're one of the largest employers. And as they look at their employee base, they realized that behavioral health, such as mild, moderate depression, anxiety, was a significant concern, and they started to integrate behavioral health into their primary care practices. They currently have that integrated in 6 primary clinics in Chicago. West Health partnered with them to study that and look for opportunities to accelerate the penetration through their system. And we'll be taking that from 6 to over 75 primary care clinics, which is the vast majority of their clinics. And Northwestern doing it not only because they have responsibility as a provider in Chicago to provide the best integrated care that they can, but it has a direct benefit, above and beyond the reimbursement for that care that accrues to them as an employer for providing better health care for their employees.
Interesting. Right, and thank you so much for coming in to chat to the Hub Culture Evening News Show. Absolutely delighted to have you here. Stay with us. We've got one, maybe even two more guests for you.
Edie.
Welcome back. This is Edie Lush coming to you live from the Hub Culture Evening News Show here in Davos 2025. Really excited to speak to our next guest, Salah Goss. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Very well. Financial inclusion and technology expert. Now, you have had an incredible career, and I just wanted to get you in to talk to me about your journey, really. And I'd love to know, first of all, how did you get started? What started you on this journey?
Well, there's a story I usually tell. I call it my origin story. So if you'll indulge me, maybe I'll tell maybe a short version of that story. So I was about 8 years old, and there was a company called Johnson Company that made this product called Stay Soft Fro. So it's Afro Sheen. So in the 70s, a lot of people had afros. You spray it on your afro to make it nice and shiny. Well, on the back of the bottle, there was a contest. And the company that owned the product thought every American family, especially Black American family, should see Africa at least once. So my mother, being who she was, set us up, and we had a competition of who could fill out these entry forms.
Right.
Who could fill them out the most between me and my sisters. Anyway, we won.
I love it.
So we're off to Ivory Coast, and then we actually won again to Kenya. But on the first trip to Ivory Coast, we go to this trading village. My mother knew I was a very artsy kid, loved art. So somehow she got me connected to this local artist, and we made this beautiful picture together. Actually, I still have it. But after we were done making the picture, the rest of the artists came out, and the families that came on the trip started buying things. And so we're just buying this beautiful wares, ivory, mahogany. And so that's done. So my mother then goes to the back of the van, takes out our suitcase, and opens it up. And to my surprise, she takes out our jeans, sweaters, these are used, toilet paper, I don't know how she knew to bring toilet paper, playing cards, and ballpoint pens. And she brings it to the artists and their family who we've gotten to know, we were buying things from, and they're so excited to have these things that come from the US. And so they start trying to give us even more statues and bracelets and earrings. And I was just baffled and confused. I was such a lover of the arts. It kind of upset me that they would trade these beautiful things for my jeans and my sweaters, you know, that had the logo on it or whatever. And I didn't know anything like Gini coefficient or balance of powers or anything like that, international relations. And it just crashed in my little head that they thought what we had was more valuable than what they had. And up until that point, they looked like me. We were getting to know them. It seemed like, you know, they were families like we were families. And I didn't have the words to articulate it, but I was so hurt that they would give away these beautiful things. So I went back to the US. I found that I wrote this little essay that said I will live in West Africa, learn French, and help West African families.
Amazing.
And not that they needed my help, but I needed to answer this question: what made what I had from a certain part of the world have more value, apparently, to them than what I thought was priceless? And so access to resources, inequality, this is kind of what I came to understood it meant. But then I was just like, this cannot be. Like, all these beautiful things are not worth my pair of jeans. What's going on? And I think that really started my curiosity in terms of people being able to control their own economic destiny.
And you've stayed very true to this dream. Have you learned French, by the way?
I did.
Nice.
I did.
Nice
Don't
work.
test me, please.
I don't even think I have enough French to
Good.
even say, no, I won't.
That's a good thing.
Mais non. How about that? But you carried on. You've worked for some incredible organizations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. You've worked in Senegal. You've worked for Soros as well, I believe. Tell me a little bit more about your journey. What came next?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to actually fulfill that promise and live and work in West Africa. So actually, in between my master's program, the first and second year, you can apply to do research. And so I went to Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, so with the international studies, and I got funded to do research in Senegal on competition in the microfinance market. Senegal has a very robust history of microfinance, so much so that women were actually competing, like they had multiple loans that they could have. And so I wanted to know what that meant in terms of their access. So I was there doing my interviews with my little paper, with my French, my baby French, and for some reason I kept getting job offers. And so SAIS, in all of their wisdom, let me stay for 4 years. I ended up working for the Soros Foundation and helped them set up the regional West Africa office So he worked in 16 countries of West Africa, did amazing things like Democracy Radio. Their kind of thesis was nobody has a monopoly on the truth. So we had local radio stations. We did Democracy and Governance, HIV/AIDS. And it was a great lesson because there were so many organizations, I think about 400, but very small. And so I knew the women running these community organizations. They would come and sit in my office, tell me about the things that they were doing in their community, the girls that they were helping, the projects they were setting up. It was like really hands-on, which is different than Gates Foundation I went to later, where one project could be $20 million.
Right.
So I really got to see the gamut of what philanthropy can do, to very tiny grassroots, making a difference community by community, to Gates Foundation, which I would describe more as systems change, and setting up facilities and having bigger programs with global organizations. So I think I was fortunate to actually fulfill that, living in West Africa. And then even at the Gates Foundation, covered a lot of West Africa in the portfolio.
You've used that word community, and I know that that's also an important part of your journey. You did some community organizing in Chicago.
I did.
And then you've also learned about community through studying Sharia finance. Tell me about those two areas.
Right, kind of different. So
Very different, both have community.
Right, that's true, community at the center. So when I graduated from college, I came back to Chicago. My idea was, okay, if I'm gonna study international development is what I was originally studying, and hope to make a difference in places just to kind of help with that, hearkening back to that promise I made to myself, I should probably start my own backyard. I should understand how my community functions before I become a student of another one internationally. So I went back to Chicago. I worked for the Department of Commerce. I was a partnership specialist, so it was my job to go in areas and communities, is the word again, that really didn't interact with the government. So typically this was foreign-born, English as a second language, and we have lots of diversity in Chicago. So I would go in these communities and I'd work with local politicians, education, media, and churches. And I could do whatever that community needed to get civically engaged. So we can do parades, we could do contests. My favorite story from that is that Barack Obama actually
I was going to ask
quoted
if you
me.
met him.
I didn't meet him, and he does not know my name.
But he did quote you?
So I was doing my spiel in a community center, getting people to understand how important it was to be civically engaged. Your traffic lights depended on it. How many books you had in your school depended on it. This was really important. And I was running down statistics, and he walks in. This is 2000. He's already a rock star in Chicago.
Okay.
So of course, heads do this.
Yeah.
No one's listening to me anymore.
Right.
And so he's shaking the hands, kissing the rings, but I keep going
Yeah.
as one does.
Yeah.
And I sit down, and I knew how smart he was when he got up after me. He said, as a young lady said, I was a young lady, and he quoted exactly what I said. So he had the ability to make everyone feel like they were the only one in the room, but was still listening. So that's my Barack Obama story.
Okay.
But what it taught me was that people fundamentally want to be heard, and they want agency. And that's the word that I think the river that runs through my career is trying to give people agency. They can be the archetypes of their own financial future and their progress. So whether it was on the far south side of Chicago or whether it was a village in Uganda, what I aim to do was give people agency and give them some tools to actually be able to provide for them and their family.
Fascinating. How did Sharia finance fit into that?
So I went to Cairo, Egypt, right after SICE. So first year, 4 years in Senegal, I finally finished up and then off to Egypt. I got a Boren Fellowship, National Security Education Program, to learn Arabic. And because I went to grad school, I finished a little later because those 4 years I wanted to work. And so I worked for a Sanabel, which is the network of microfinance, Sharia compliant microfinance institutions. And so I did the financial analysis. And what I found fascinating there is that there's a lot of principles that are kind of based on community. So the idea of not having something that's usury, but giving someone a tool that they can use in terms of building their family and whatever they need the loan for, but still having principles that are kind of like giving back. So it's just interesting to see another aspect of finance, and it deepened my belief that it really can be a tool for progress.
Fascinating. So Tell me a little bit now about more recent years, and you've moved from doing the work, you're still doing the work, but you're also managing people. How has that transition been, and what's important to think about as a leader?
Very good question. And you know, I think there is a shift, because I think you go from trying to make sure you're doing a good job and that you're showing up and contributing to figuring out how to lead a team. And I was telling somebody, it came to me kind of late, that as much as I am passionate and a student of the work, I think what you can contribute to your teammates is probably the most important thing. People come to the work in different angles and different reasons, but I really do fundamentally believe everybody wants to do a good job. Everybody cares about the work, and so empowering people is kind of what I focus on. And this really kind of hit home because I have lived and worked in 6 different countries. And a lot of times I have teams from different cultures and backgrounds. So making sure they have what they need to succeed in whatever organization I'm in is very important to me.
Interesting. What's an example of that?
There's a funny example. There's this young man that was in my team. I won't say his name, so I won't embarrass him.
Right.
And I was in Kenya, and so I was running a technology lab, and I always asked my team, what do you need from me? How can I support you? Everyone's style is different. And so we formed a relationship. He's fantastic, brilliant, ran his team beautifully. And I asked him, what do you need from me? And he paused. And I said, you can, speak up. And he said, Salah, you ask too many questions. And he said, it's okay, but I don't think that fast. So if you can ask the questions, you can, but allow me to come back with the answer. And I said, fine, brilliant, perfect. And that's what we did. And that was an example of me trying to figure out what he needed. And I was just so that was like 7 years ago, we're still in touch.
Amazing.
I was just thankful that he was honest enough to tell me that. Because if you're a manager, you're not giving your people what they need to thrive, you're not doing your job.
What would you, if you could go back and tell that 8-year-old something, what would it be?
I would say, that's a good question. I think I would say don't be so hard on yourself.
Okay.
Maybe in the pursuit of really wanting to contribute. I think I would say that leading with your heart and your passion is not a bad thing. And I think I would say don't be afraid to be who you are, because often your unique perspective is the thing that makes the difference.
Amazing. You have truly designed your own destiny, Salah, which is, I know, one of the things that you live by. Thank you so much for being a part of the Hub Culture show tonight, the evening show. We'll be back tomorrow morning. See you then.
Thank you.